This week on the Creation Today show.
Why is this topic important? As many in the evolutionary camp, they view endogenous retroviruses, shared endogenous retroviral-like sequences in the biological world, as the single best piece of evidence for common descent. And so as biblical creationists, it is important that we address their best challenges. Now let's make ERVs fun again.
Welcome to the Creation Today show, where we bring together interviews with experts and solid Bible teaching. Your host, Eric Hovind, affirms the ultimate authority of God's Word, the truth of creation, and why it matters to you.
For decades, evolutionists have pointed to endogenous retroviruses, ERVs, as some of the most irrefutable proof of common ancestry between humans and apes. They claim that they call them fossil viruses in our DNA, are remnants of ancient viral infections that our ancestors supposedly inherited over millions of years that were then passed down to us. But there is a huge plot twist going on in science today, guys. Turns out ERVs are actually evidence for divine creation, and they are destroying the idea of common ancestry between apes and humans. So evolution, guys, is D-E-A-D, dead. It's dead on arrival today. Evolutionists, as you watch today's show and you realize that you've once again been duped by a story that doesn't match reality, you should be reminded of the song by Queen in 1980 as he sings about bullets ravaging an ex-partner that treated him badly. And he says, and another one's gone, and another one's gone, and another one bites the dust. That's what we're doing with this piece of supposed evidence for evolution today. Before I introduce my guests, though, I want to remind you that we've got some amazing events coming up. Our Grand Canyon tour just this last week sold out for 2025. So that one's can't go on that one anymore. We're going to have a great group on that one. But if you want to get on the list for next year, go to creationtoday.org/sign up, creationtoday.org/sign up, and you can get on our email list and we'll tell you about next year's tour. And we'd love to have you on that. We've got the Evangelism Summit coming right here to Pensacola, Florida. That is happening in June. Seating is very limited on that. We want a few people, and we want to do intense training over a 4-day period. So if you want to attend that summit, the Evangelism Summit, head over to creationtoday.org/events right away, and let's get registered. The summit's going to be amazing. I've got John Harris from Living Waters Europe. I've got Mark Spence from Living Waters US, and yours truly, I'll be there. We have 4 days of intense evangelism training, on the street experience. It's really going to blow your socks off. You're going to love it. And thank you, by the way, to Living Waters Europe and Living Waters US for partnering with us to do this evangelism training. This is truly going to be the experience of a lifetime. We also have the Mount St. Helens trip coming up in August. That's in concert with Answers in Genesis, the Mount St. Helens Creation Center, and the Design Science Association. We love this experience. It's really going to be amazing. Hiking down into really modern day evidence of the worldwide flood. I mean, this was the first time that we watched the volcano happen. We saw the geologic landslides. We saw the unbelievable evidence that shows us catastrophism is what created the events created the geology that we see around the world today. So powerful, powerful trip. We'd love for you guys to go on that one. Now, getting back, though, to the subject of ERVs, one of the top, if not a very top tier evidence for the evolution worldview, and another supposed piece of evidence that is, like I said, it's going to bite the dust. Kent, you're going to have to throw that song in the edit. Another one is going to bite the dust here. I've got two awesome guests for this conversation. You're probably going to remember them from a couple months ago as we touched on genetics versus evolution. They are, number one, Donny Budinsky, a researcher who has spent years, I think he has eaten, slept, breathed, just done all kinds of stuff on endogenous retroviruses. He's here to shatter that evolutionary narrative, break down the real function of ERVs, and show you what they're really doing, along with his cohort, Matt Nailor. I think I'm going to call him the Kung Fu creationist, okay? He loves research so much. He does it full time as he works with Donny and their ministry, Standing for Truth. You're going to love them both. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Donny and Matt. Donny and Matt, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys.
Eric, As always, it is a privilege to be here with you today. I think you nailed it, brother. Another one bites the dust, and we are going to prove that for you and your audience here this afternoon.
Matt and Donnie, I don't mean to put too much pressure on you, but I got to tell you, I got a guy that calls me on the regular. He's been on my show before right here in studio. In my context, he's called Atheist Bill. And he says he's an atheist, but he's a very honest guy. He's like, oh, atheists can't explain that. Oh, atheists got a problem with that. So I really love conversations with him because he's not trying to sugarcoat something and create a narrative. He told me, and Matt, you got to help me out with this. Donnie, you got to help me out with this. He said endogenous retroviruses are his last holdout for evolution being true and creation being wrong. He said that's the only thing keeping me from coming to Christ. And so in one sense, I want to try to say, guys, I got a lot riding on this. I'm going to send this show to Bill and say, hey, Bill, what do you think? So no pressure, but a lot riding on this conversation, guys. Can you handle that kind of pressure?
Of course we can. This is what we do. This is the fun part.
We work well under pressure, yes.
I love it. And the good news is I know ultimately, and I've told Bill this, man, no amount of evidence is going to convert you. It's only the Holy Spirit that can open your eyes. But I pray that this conversation will open his eyes, along with other evolutionists that are out there that really are seeing this as a top tier evidence for evolution. Okay, I got about 24 minutes to go here with social media. So Donnie, can you kick us off on, ERVs and give us kind of an overview of what they are, and then let's get into this debunking right away so we can see exactly what they are and how they're actually evidence for creation, not for evolution, and how people have been lied to. Is it okay to just jump right in with that, guys?
Absolutely, brother. Let's do it. Let's leave no stone unturned today on the topic of ERVs, endogenous retroviruses.
And by the way, you wrote a book on, I was going to say, there's the book. Okay. You
Yes.
got to get his book on this. If you want more information, go to Standing for Truth Ministries website, which is standingfortruthministry.com.org.
Standingfortruthministries.com. Yes.
Standingfortruthministries.com. Go there and you can click the link right there. They got a whole section just on ERVs, endogenous retroviruses. You're really going to get educated on this, as it is a top tier argument for evolution, or evidence, they say, for evolution. So jump in and show us what's really going on.
Okay, brother, let's set the foundation a little bit as Matt and I tackle the main questions and the biggest points surrounding this issue of ERVs. And so, as you pointed out, Eric, and I appreciate it, you can find my book, The Endogenous Retrovirus Handbook. You can grab a copy from Amazon. It is available now, but you can access it through the website, standingfortruthministries.com. Now, why is this topic important? Well, Eric laid it out nicely. As many in the evolutionary camp, they view endogenous retroviruses, shared endogenous retroviral-like sequences in the biological world, as the single best piece of evidence for common descent. And so as biblical creationists, it is important that we address their best challenges. And so that is exactly why this is an important topic. Now let's make ERVs fun again. It is a technical topic, Eric, and I don't know how much fun ERVs were in the past, but we are going to do our best here this afternoon to make ERVs as fun as we can. And I'm excited for this. So here's
I'll be the idiot that asks clarifying questions when I don't understand what you're saying. So
of course, that's what I'm here for, clarifying questions and keeping this comprehensive for the audience. And so I want people to think on this question throughout today's program. It is an important question. I'll bring it up several times, and Matt will also help and assist us in answering it. Are endogenous retroviruses really the ancient remnants of past viral infections? Eric, you started off in your introduction pointing out that the evolutionary community sees ERV sequences as fossil viruses. So the question is, are they really fossil viruses, or are they created units of DNA function? Both positions have very different expectations and predictions. We, as a biblical creationist, we would expect design, purpose, and function associated with these ERVs. The evolutionary community would expect largely junk. Now, here are several important questions that Matt and I are going to answer very thoroughly in this program. Why are ERV-like sequences shared between the genomes of organisms? Sneak preview or teaser, it is common design. We are going to get to the reasons why. You'll see this question is like asking, why do all types of modes of transportation have engines in common? Well, engines are important. Without an engine in your car, Eric, you're probably not going to get very far. You're not going to be able to use the car for what it was designed to be used
I'm going to be Fred Flintstoning it, no doubt
That's
about
right.
it.
That's right. So the second question, if viral-like sequences in the genomes of organisms are functional, which we are going to demonstrate directly from the conventional literature, we're going to refute shared endogenous retroviral-like sequences directly from the secular literature itself. As we go through today's program, you're going to find that ERVs are functional in embryological development. They're functional in determining cell types, gene regulation, gene expression. They act as antiviral protectors. I'm excited for you guys to see this directly from the conventional literature. The next question we will be addressing is, why do they bear similarity to viral genetic material? Why do ERVs look like exogenous retroviruses, which we'll get into more here in the next couple slides. The third question, which Matt is going to primarily address here today, what is the best explanation for the nested hierarchical distribution of endogenous retroviral-like sequences in primate genomes? What that means is, okay, we have ERV sequences and we share more of them with the chimpanzee than we do with a gorilla or an orangutan or a dog. And so there's this natural nested hierarchy. And we're going to see that that hierarchy is there due to design as we move forward today. And the last question, the most important question, can the separate ancestry model better explain the data than common descent? And teaser, yes, it can. Let's go over the details. Help us understand exactly what we are dealing with here today. According to the standard evolutionary story of endogenous retroviruses, an ERV is a stretch of DNA found in your DNA that got there when one of your ancestors was infected by a retrovirus. So that's the story. That's the evolutionary story as to how we got these ERV sequences, that ancestors in the distant past, millions of years ago, were infected by harmful retroviruses, and they were infected in the right way, in the right spot, to be passed down to future generations. That's why they call them, as you can see here on this slide, fossil viruses. Directly from their own literature, that's what they call them. As you can see here, these ERVs, as they are called in technical terms, represent footprints of previous retroviral infection and have been termed fossil viruses. But are they really? They also acknowledge in the conventional literature, Eric, that these infections would have occurred millions of years ago. So for the most part, they're not really observing them occur today. They're inferring it from the distant past.
So let me get, okay, you're about to show this. Okay, yeah. So they're basically saying somewhere way back when, in the book of life of a chimp, in the DNA data of a chimp, it got a virus, and that virus has been passed down chimp to chimp to chimp to chimp, all the way along to as we eventually evolved into human. And we still have them today, and they still have them, which shows that we came from each other, or we evolved from a chimp.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying would be going back millions of years ago. You have humans and chimpanzees today. Those are extant organisms. They would share a common ancestor. So they would put our common ancestor, humans and chimpanzees, back about 6 million years ago. And so that common ancestor would have been hit or infected, Eric, with exogenous retroviruses. So this is why this visual is important, because there's a
Okay.
difference between exogenous retrovirus and endogenous.
Okay.
Endogenous means that it's occurring from within. So you start off your life with endogenous retroviral-like sequences in your body already. So they occur from within. Exogenous means that they occur from outside. And so a famous or a well-known exogenous retrovirus would be HIV. And so that is transmitted horizontally. It's not going to be passed down through the germ cell line, a sperm or egg cell. So that's why there's a difference between horizontal transmission, as you can see here at the top, and vertical transmission. So in order to
Okay.
get an ERV, that common ancestor between humans and chimps, they would have had to be infected with an exogenous retrovirus, horizontally, externally, but that retrovirus would have had to infect a germ cell line, a reproductive cell, in order to be passed down vertically, where all progeny will have that viral sequence. And that's why they
Gotcha.
look to shared ERVs as evidence for common descent, because they say, okay, we share this many with the chimpanzee. So humans have this many ERVs. Chimpanzees have ERVs in the same genetic locations. Therefore, we must have inherited them from a past common ancestor. And after the split, we can see them in their respective locations, essentially.
So we still have them because our common ancestor had them.
Right, right.
Okay.
So our common ancestor got the infections and they were passed down to both
Yeah.
lineages. So here on the slide, we have, surprisingly, 45% of our genomes are made up of what's called transposable elements. Okay. And again, I'll give a sneak preview. All of these DNA elements, these incredibly designed DNA elements here, have known functions, essential functions. We're specifically focusing on ERVs today, though. And so ERVs are a specific element called a retro element, but even more specific, they are an LTR. So LTR stands for long terminal repeat. That is an aspect or component of the ERV. We're going to get into that in the next slide. And so ERVs technically make up about 8% of the genome. And so the argument advances, the evolutionists will say, well, why would God create human beings with genomes littered with viral DNA, viral fossils? So here are the different types of transposable elements: signs, lines, retrotransposons, various classes of retrotransposons, but ERVs. So that last one there, endogenous retroviruses, this is what we're primarily focusing on here. And so here's the structure. This is an important point in terms of the details. Then we're really going to hammer this one home and show why what Eric said is true. Another one bites the dust. And so here we've got LTRs on either side. This is the structure of the ERV. It's also important to point out that a retrovirus in general, Eric, they're a special type of virus that have specifically an RNA genome. So their genetic material is RNA, and what they can do is convert that into DNA. This is called reverse transcription. So see that as transcription in reverse, right? Normally you got DNA to RNA to protein, but DNA transcribed into RNA translated into a protein. A retrovirus, to get its DNA integrated into a host genome, they have to perform what's called reverse transcription. So that's their RNA into DNA. And they do that through an important enzyme that's coded here in the ERV. So in between your LTRs, you've got GAG, PRO, POL, and ENV. So ENV is your envelope protein, and your GAG and POL genes, those are what encode, specifically your POL gene encodes for enzymes like reverse transcriptase, which allows for this really cool mechanism of reverse transcription, protease and integrase. And so basically your retrovirus needs all of those enzymes in order to do their job, in order to infiltrate and integrate into a host. a host genome. Here's another question I want the audience to consider as we move forward. We are going to be wrapping up the program, Matt and I, with what's called the superior model. So here's a question I want you all to consider, and I'm not going to necessarily answer it just yet. Okay. The evolutionary community really struggles with the origin of retroviruses because a retrovirus requires a host, Eric, to replicate. So the question is, it's a paradox for the evolutionists. What came first, the retrovirus or the host? If a retrovirus requires a host to replicate, then wouldn't the host have to come first? Wouldn't the host or cells have to predate retroviruses? And we'll get...
That sounds accurate, yes.
So we're going to get into why that's important a little bit later. So in a nutshell, all of these technical details, what you have here in terms of the structure of the ERV, we have ERVs sharing sequence similarity to retroviruses. So retroviruses and ERVs, as in full ERVs, which are called a provirus, they are made up of the same components, LTRs on either side, GAG, pro, pol, and ENV. So the argument continues from the evolutionists to say, well, why do ERVs, let's say if they're created units of DNA function, why do they look like retroviruses? That's a good question, and we'll answer it. How does viral DNA become endogenous? So here's some important details, summing up predominantly what I've discussed so far. A retrovirus uses host DNA to integrate itself after converting their RNA genome into DNA. That's the reverse transcription I was describing. And the way they can do that is through a cool enzyme called reverse transcriptase. And they utilize the cell's machinery to replicate. This is because retroviruses lack the ability to replicate themselves. This process leaves a copy of the retrovirus insertion in the DNA of the infected cell. Then if the infected cell is germline, right, you got that difference between horizontal transmission and vertical transmission, and the retroviral DNA is passed on vertically, every copy of the descendant's DNA will have this viral DNA. So let's...
I got Gary on the chat saying, I'm going to flunk this quiz. When we do the quiz, he's going to flunk, man. It's like, there's a lot of technical stuff here. And is it really important that we understand this, or are you just trying to communicate it to say, hey, I know, like, how much do we need to go back and rewind and listen until we understand that in order to get what you're about to say about they really have function?
I would say it's very important, because in order to adequately refute ERVs, we want to understand what the other side, what the evolutionary community are saying, why they believe ERVs are such a good line of evidence for common descent. We want to understand where they're coming from. And so in a nutshell, and I promise you're going to do great on the quiz, in a nutshell, why do we share ERVs with basically all creatures in the biological world? And why do they look like retroviruses? If they didn't come from retroviruses, why do they look like retroviruses? So those are the two main questions I want you to focus on. And
hang on. You're going to get to the point where you say the name endogenous retrovirus is a bad name.
Right. Right.
Holy
Eric.
smokes.
So
no, like that's huge. Like that's where you're like, if they're used for what you're saying here, tumor suppression, acting as, like, they have a function. They're the naming of the virus, or the naming of it as endogenous retrovirus, is the whole problem, because they're seeing it as that rather than seeing it as a design by God.
You nailed it. The ERV did not name itself ERV. And
wow, this is good.
I've been pointing that out for years. Unfortunately, the evolutionary community, they named the ERV an ERV before we could. So the ERV did not name itself ERV. And you're going to notice, just like on these fancy, sophisticated computers that we do these important programs over, we have built-in antiviral programs. Well, it turns out that these ERV sequences are exactly that, but for the genomes of biological organisms, that they act as antiviral programs where they actually work and function to fight off invading harmful viruses, including exogenous retroviruses. And in order for them to carry out those roles Eric, which we're going to get into, a fascinating paper that essentially debunks ERVs, and the authors didn't even realize it. So the ERV has to look like the retrovirus in order to carry out a number of these functions. And so here's a
Holy
few of the functions.
smokes.
It's a great time to be a biblical creationist, Eric. So ERVs are playing an antiviral role in the genome. Now, this is an important point as well. Evolutionists did not predict these types of functions for ERVs. So you can see all throughout their literature, you can watch their lectures on this topic, and they will admit that ERVs were largely assumed to be junk. Because if they're just fossil viruses, why would they be functional in gene expression, that process by which a gene is turned on to produce an RNA or a protein, or gene regulation, which controls the expression process. You could see gene regulation as if you have a controller for your TV and you're turning up the volume or turning it down. That's gene regulation. And that's what a lot of the so-called junk DNA is active in, is regulating genes. And this one is key, Eric. ERVs are essential in regulating early stages of human embryonic development. Have a look at this, brother. You're going to be blown
Hang
away.
on. What, we got to come up with a different name then. I mean, I don't even want to call this an ERV anymore. I'm like,
Right.
It's the exact opposite of what they say it is. It's literally the exact opposite. They say it's this fossil virus. It's the exact opposite. It's doing something.
We need to come together and have a meeting and come up with a better name. That's why I asked the question, are these really the ancient remnants of past viral infections, or are they created units of DNA function? So that
we
for
got to
now,
rename it. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to Chat GPT. We're finding out a better name for these things.
Exactly. We could always
the name is the whole problem. It's like the word evolution. The word evolution is the problem. Like, what do you mean? That's a tricky word. So, oh my goodness, the name is the problem. That's huge.
Well, and there's another fancy DNA element called a pseudogene, but that's a wrong name for that DNA element. A pseudogene means a false gene, or it's a genetic mistake, basically. And they'll say, oh, we got genetic mistakes shared between humans and chimps, so we must have inherited those mistakes from past common ancestors. But now we know that these so-called pseudogenes, Eric, are necessary and essential to sustain healthy life processes in the cell. So should we really be calling them pseudogenes? In this case, should we really be calling these essential DNA elements ERVs or ERVs? No, I don't think we should. This is a fascinating paper right here. Notice this. This is directly from the conventional literature. And notice what they say here. As we have summarized in this review, HERVs, so if you got the H there, it's human-specific endogenous retrovirus, appear to play important roles in physiology, fetal development, the baby, and of course they want to throw in human evolution because they've always got that evolutionary mindset and assumption, right? Notice this part. If the accidental infection of a mammalian ancestor, so right off the bat, when you read papers from the conventional literature, Eric, you want to read between the lines because they get a lot of their evolutionary philosophy in there. What we care about, what we're concerned about is the data. What does the data say? So they're assuming that there was an accidental infection. But what we're about to read is going to suggest that there wasn't. So here we go. If the accidental infection of a mammalian ancestor by an exogenous, right? So there's the X again. So that would have been external horizontal transmission. Exogenous retrovirus had never occurred. The placenta and the mammals that produce it, including humans, would never have existed. So these ERVs are essential for embryological development and for placental development, which is an incredibly important structure for the development of a baby. Eric, you like to exist. I like to exist. Matt, I think you like to exist as well, brother. Wait a minute.
How did these supposed common ancestors that we both evolved from, how did they exist before this exogenous virus came in and allowed them to create the placenta? It's like you couldn't even have the babies then at that point.
That's right. And for the placenta to work, this important structure needs to be connected to the baby, which transfers gases and nutrients and recycles waste. And so before this so-called accidental infection of an exogenous retrovirus took place, how were mammals having babies? Where was the
Yeah.
placenta? How is all this taking place? So when they asked the question, Eric, are you starting to see why another one bites the dust? Why do
Yeah.
we share ERVs with chimpanzees? Well, wait a minute. Why do all kinds of modes of transportation have engines in common? They're important. They're essential. It's good design. Chimpanzees need to have babies. They have embryological development, and so do humans. Now, there's
They
several
need a
papers.
placenta and we need a placenta. I mean, that's why we both have them.
Exactly. Without
Wow.
ERVs, Eric, the placenta, which is critical to pregnancy and embryological development, would not work. We
Wow.
literally require ERVs to live. If we didn't have them, then we wouldn't be here. And there's several papers in the secular literature. Here's a couple right here. One at the top about embryological development, one at the bottom about the immune response. And this is a newer one. So this came out in 2021. This is one of my favorite papers. How endogenous retroviruses protect us from viral infections. Another amazing function that I really want to point out before we hand it to Matt, because this is an important one, is called tumor suppression. So because the ERV looks like a retrovirus, what it can do in the cell, Eric, is transcribed ERVs in tumor cells. This is called viral mimicry. The immune system sees that cell and it works together with what's called the guardian of the genome, the P53 protein, an incredibly designed superhero protein. In combination with the P53 protein, the immune system sees that tumor cell, it sees that ERV that's transcribed, and so the immune system attacks it with destruction. And cancer researchers are utilizing ERVs to kill tumors and stop cancer. And so this incredible function, it necessitates the ERV looking like the retrovirus. It's fighting fire with fire. And so when the evolutionists ask, well, why do ERVs look like the retroviruses? That's because many of their functional roles are dependent upon the sequence similarity to retroviruses. It would be like, I'll use this analogy. People like mafia movies, right? If an FBI agent were to infiltrate the mob, is he going to show up with his FBI badge and his name tag? He's not going to get very far, right? He'd have to dress the part.
Right.
He'd have to look the part. So the ERVs have to look the part in order to what? Fight off invading viruses. They do that
Because
because
they
of their
literally they mimic it, so they go in so that they can get in, so that they can kill. So
exactly
okay,
right.
that has to be somehow that has to be part of the name, guys. Give me some good names in the comments here. What are we doing with this undercover virus or this virus in disguise? Like what that's really what it's doing. That's amazing.
I like that, virus in disguise. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this may have been a challenge in the past where the evolutionary community would ask, why do ERVs look like retroviruses? Okay, but now, since it's such a great time to be a biblical creationist, we have paper after paper. Notice this one, long disregarded. So when you see an evolutionary scientist or a guardian of common descent, Eric, try and hand wave away the reality that most evolutionists used to believe or assume junk DNA, non-function, they admit right in these papers, long disregarded as what? Junk DNA.
John.
Or genomic dark matter. Junk DNA, Eric, is junk science. And
Wow.
ERVs, notice this, ERVs have turned out to represent important components of the antiviral immune response. Proteins and components of the ERV are utilized to block receptors and essentially stop harmful viruses from coming in and infecting. These are our antiviral protectors. Oh, why do we share them with the chimpanzees? Why do we share them with the gorilla? Why do we share them with all these different forms of life? Well, of course, other forms of life in the biological world also need functional DNA elements to protect them against viral invaders. This is all good design. And when they say this, Eric, when they say, oh, well, these functions were co-opted, these were evolved, randomly inserting viral DNA into the genome of a biological organism will more likely disrupt genetic functionality rather than improve upon it. Think about it. If I'm painting a painting, okay, and the painting looks beautiful, and then you come about, Eric, and you blindfold me and say, okay, continue painting that picture. Am I going to improve it if I start randomly applying brushstrokes? No, I'm going to make it
Well, it
worse.
depends on your initial abilities, but no,
Right.
I doubt it's going to make it any better.
Perhaps I'm a bad painter to start with. And so, and
I was
so
gonna say today with what is it? What kind of art is it that has no purpose? What's that kind of art that they're doing? And it's just like throwing paint against a
right.
wall and calling
Yeah.
it. Man, what is the name of that? Somebody tell me
I
the name
can't
of that.
remember, but yeah, they're just tossing
Abstract art. Yeah, exactly. So that's the truth. So evolutionists look at our whole body as abstract art. They look at all of us as an accident, throwing paint against a wall, and oh, look what happened. And the whole view is wrong. So they're looking at extra random brushstrokes as maybe, and it's like, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, guys.
Amen. Praise the Lord. And I'll point this out, then we'll hand it to Matt because we're probably getting close to that 30-minute mark.
Yeah.
And Eric, there is so much on this topic. In my book, I have dozens and dozens of papers. We've only gone over 2 or 3. And I give full presentations, an hour and a half to 2 hours, going in depth into these papers. And so what that means is no, ERVs are not a good line of evidence for common descent. An important point to consider when they say, oh, we share all these ERVs with the biological world. When you look into the data, only 10% of ERVs, which need a new name, represent full ERVs or provirus, where you got the LTRs, GAG, POL, ENV that we went over earlier. Over 90% of ERVs represent what's called solo LTRs, long terminal repeats. So they're not even full ERVs. They're assuming that, well, you find this solo LTR here in the genome, that must be a degenerated ERV that lost its other components. And then they consider that an ERV sequence. But my question is this: are these solo LTRs degenerated ERVs or functional stretches of DNA? Well, let's see. From this paper, what do they say? Well, they admit what I just pointed out. Intriguingly, almost 90% of all HERVs represent so-called solo LTRs. And they point out here that ERV LTRs have already been termed landing strips for inflammatory transcription factors, and evidence for their role in regulating cell immune responses is growing. So it turns out that the LTRs act as promoters, enhancers, and even act in the immune system. So you see a solo LTR, they got function. They got function, brother.
Wow. Okay, I got to take a social break, but hang on just a second. Hey, Bill, endogenous retroviruses are dead on the evolution worldview, period. Can't wait for you to see this information and come back to Christianity, period.
Amen.
Love you, buddy.
We just want to plant seeds, and then the Holy Spirit can work through the hearts of the unbeliever. If I could, Eric, let me just point out this excerpt, because this is really important. Okay. The endogenous LTRs mentioned above, and again, this is all from the conventional literature. The sources are at the bottom. Check out the paper if you want to, dig real deep on this. This alone should be enough, though, to change your mind on ERVs. They all act as enhancers and may increase antiviral gene expression in response to viral infection. And so here's a couple papers, LTRs as promoters for human genes. So if you see a solo LTR, that does not necessitate that this is a degenerated ERV, where over time the ERV lost its components. No, this is a functional stretch of DNA. And the reason why we share it with the chimpanzee and other forms of life is good design. Promoters are important. Promoters are genetic switches in the genome, and those are important. And Eric, I'll hand it over. I could go on and on and on, brother, but maybe we'll stop here for a second. I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I do need to let our social media go, guys. This is huge. I mean, this is like earth-shattering to the number one evidence for evolution. Oh, we share this virus, endogenous retrovirus. Chimps have it, humans have it, and they're very similar. That proves we had a common ancestor. I mean, this, even like you said, the conventional literature is blowing that apart. No, you have a designer that said you need a placenta, you need something that can go undercover, disguise itself as a virus, get into there, get into that tumor, and kill it. Like, it has a reason, it has a function. This is amazing. So if you believe in evolution, and this is your number one point, I just hope that song, every time you see ERV, I hope that song, Another One Bites the Dust, goes through your mind, because this is done. It's dead. It's not going to work. Okay, we got to get to Matt. I'm sorry I didn't get to you even in this very beginning first half, but let's just go as long as we need with our Creation Today partners, guys, and let's really make sure this is explained clearly. So Another One Bites the Dust. It's a terrible song about shooting somebody and riddling somebody with bullets. But since we're applying it to evolution, let's have all these evidence just riddle evolution as we go through this for the next half hour with our partners here. To my social media viewers, please go check out standingfortruthministries.org, org.com. I forgot again. Org.com. Yeah, it's on the screen right there. Okay, go check out standingfortruthministries.com and see the work that Matt and Donny do there. You can go to their tab, Endogenous Retroviruses, get the book. They've done extensive videos, even covering more than what we've covered here today. So they go all into it. Please go check that out. And then support the work that they do, guys. Make sure you guys are helping these guys stay on the front lines and do the work that they're trying to accomplish. We really appreciate that and appreciate what they're doing. Hey, got a great show for you next week, guys. I'm really excited about next week's conversation. I really want to look at why is it that we say as Christians we believe the Bible is our ultimate authority, and then when a scientific study comes out and it confirms what the Bible says, we're like, well, look, it really is true. And it's like the study, while we can get excited about it, all it does is confirm. So I want to look at kind of our priority, the Bible versus secular science, in next week's conversation with my friend Ben Shetler. I know you're going to enjoy that conversation. Until then, until next Wednesday, go out and share the gospel with somebody who needs to hear it. If you believe in evolution or have thought that endogenous retroviruses were a great fit for you, and you're realizing it's not true, another one bites the dust, please come to creationtoday.org/gift, G-I-F-T. I would love to share with you the truth, the fact that you were created by God and He has a reason and a purpose for your life. Come on over to creationtoday.org/gift and let me share that information with you. All right, Kung Fu Creationist Matt is going to kick us off here with our partners. But until then, I'll see you guys next week. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation, I encourage you to come on over to creationtoday.org. Partner with us. What we do with our partners is we say, hey, just help us. You give whatever you can to help us spread the gospel around the world, and you're our partner. Honestly, it doesn't matter how much you give, just partner with us to spread the gospel. And with that, we give you access to everything we do, past, present, and future. So we'd love to have you over at creationtoday.org as a partner with us to spread this gospel, the truth about the gospel, around the world. I'll see you guys next week.